This is an introduction to the letter to the Hebrews. It's a brand new study. I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be maybe a little bit more involving for you if you are used to just a straightforward gospel or something like that. But I think that you will find that it's really worthwhile. The letter to the Hebrews really occupies kind of a pretty unique place in the New Testament. In a way, the way I see it, I almost see it like, do you know what a watershed is? A watershed is where like all kinds of different sources of water kind of bottleneck into a watershed, and then they come out. Or maybe even a filter would be a good image. Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews kind of filters a lot of the Old Testament for us, because it was directed most likely to Jewish Christians. Christians who were of, obviously, all Christians to begin with were Jews, right? So the first generation of Christians were Jews, and it was only later that you had Gentile Christians. But these particular Jewish Christians seem to have been even more cognizant of the whole Jewish system. So a lot of commentators think that this letter was directed to Jewish Christians of Levitical descent, which means of priestly descent. Priestly descent. So priestly descent would mean that they were a lot more familiar with what it meant to be a high priest and what it meant to be a priest in the Levitical order. So this is what I'm going to hope to accomplish with this first talk of this series. I just want to give you all a few hooks, mental hooks, upon which you can hang the material that we're going to study. And so if you're puzzled maybe in 2 or 3 lessons, you can go back and say, hey, what's one of the main purposes of the book of the Hebrews? It's supposed to teach you about the priesthood. Well, okay, and it's supposed to teach you about Jesus' sacrifice. Okay. It's supposed to teach me how to endure as a Christian. Okay. And then once you have all those hooks in mind, then when you go back to the material, you'll be able to find a cubby hole for each of the segments of the material that we are studying. This is a letter really in a category of its own because of the content and the style. The style is very high, very polished, beautifully laid out. If you are into literary analysis, which I wasn't until I started doing this kind of stuff, because I find it kind of boring. However, this literary analysis kind of shows you that the whole thing was laid out. It wasn't like Paul who kind of goes, blah. There's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of very high theological content, but this particular letter is laid out in a very intentional way to kind of give you some major points that it keeps going back to.